like I knew that Paul did not write all the letters in the New Testament. I knew that because I had a class in undergrad where I learned that. It didn't bother me because I understood why it happened that way. And it's like, oh no, it's not cheating. It's what people did back then. If they were part of a certain school of thought to say that you were this, that, it wasn't seen as plagiarism like it is today. And when you look at the letters that Paul did write and the ones that he probably did not, they're very different. Like if you read them, but that's the thing too. Like you in church, you read the words, but you're not reading for what they say. You're reading what you've been told.
Yeah.
You know, and so you will never like you'll read the story of the rich young man and see it's a spiritual thing. And it's like, well, no, that wasn't spiritual. It was like Jesus literally meant give all your stuff up because Jesus was poor. All his disciples were poor. And he literally meant like, you've done everything well, but you can't be rich and be my disciple, which even people who are very into Christ are like, really? It's like, no. He said, it is easy. Like he was being serious. He said, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into heaven. And the absurdity is that it's impossible to fit a camel through the eye of a needle. It's impossible to do so. So impossibility is easier than a rich person getting into heaven. And he meant that. It wasn't some type of spiritual thing. It was like, no, you're rich. And he had an understanding of how someone like him got rich as opposed to why all of his folks were poor. And the last will be first, the first will be last. That wasn't like, it wasn't the persecuted Christians who want to say Merry Christmas. It was like, no. The Jews who are being tormented by the Romans and the Jews who are helping the Romans oppress other people, like the people on the bottom, where it's going to be a social revolution and it's going to be flipped. And not the bottom will be the top will be the bottom. And the more, particularly when I was in the middle of divinity school, as I read more and more, it wasn't so much that I became this super radical Christian. I was just literally reading and deducing and saying, well, this kind of what this is. This is what we have. And even though that might not be a belief, but this is based off what we're given here in the text, this is what we can come to, that Jesus was very much a Jew, an apocalyptic Jew, who really had a bad view. Well, not a bad view, but he really he thought very little of rich people, whether they were Jewish or Roman. And the other key is that Jesus never healed he never required anyone he healed to pay. Which again, it's a seminary school thing, a divinity school thing. It's like he was considered an exorcist back then. That was a career back then. Like there are exorcists everywhere, and it wasn't like today where if a preacher like, oh, I'll heal you, just send me a love offering of whatever. It was like going to a doctor's office in the way we view it. So it was reasonable to expect to be paid for your services. But Jesus never accepted it. He told his disciples, don't accept payment. You know what I mean? Just do it and leave.
Yeah.
And in fact, I would argue, they say that Jesus had lots of crowds following him because of how well spoken he was. And when you consider that Jesus was around folks in his general region, the area before he went to Jerusalem, everybody was poor. The literary rate was so low. Jesus himself probably could not read but a few words here and there. And there was no microphone. So clearly it wasn't because of what he was saying. It's because he was healing people or doing something for them for free that poor people could not get anywhere else. That's how, I put it together.
I have never thought about it from that perspective, that he should have normally been getting paid and was doing it for free. So people are obviously gonna
those are the little things that you in seminary you learn. And it's never like I went to class that was like, everything they're teaching you as church is wrong. Let's go through the list. It's just you start learning things. And then you learn, you're just going through class, and all of a sudden you read something and you're like, oh, well, wait, there was no science back then. So then the Genesis couldn't be intentional. They weren't trying to do science. It's a poem? Oh, I did not know that. Oh, wait a minute. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are two separate stories. They're not the same. They both couldn't have happened. Oh, wow. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. It just starts to click. It's like, wait a minute. The snake was never called Satan in Genesis. That never happened. There is no Satan. There is no Satan to an ancient Israelite or Jews today. There's no Satan. There's no devil. So it's just like you learn these things, and it's like as you learn bits and pieces here and there, the rest falls off. And then there's some things you learn you don't realize until you say it out loud, that other people, that you step on like a red line for other people. You don't realize that either. And so that's what happens, is like these things start to just chip away little by little and bit by bit. And that's what can make it challenging for people. Because you're not like, I'm never trying to blow up anybody's faith. I was just kind of like, well, what was one thing? Oh, like I did a research paper on Jesus in the temple, and basically talking about, you know, I was arguing that Jesus is not really nonviolent in the sense that we would consider it, because I don't know how you nonviolently make a whip and nonviolently flip over tables, to the point where, and I think that's the thing, when you understand how the temple was built and what happened there, and it was the Passover, what was going on, there's no way that Jesus was just, one, doing this. I don't know how you peacefully do these things, but two, he wasn't by himself. Like, this was a riot, you know? And so what likely happened is Jesus, maybe his crew was at the head of planning it. It wasn't just some, oh, I'm angry today. It's like, no, he went and made a whip. This was intentional. And this was the siege. Maybe he thought that at this moment, that if he did all this, then God would come, and then he ended up being murdered. So it didn't happen after all. I can see that being like the reality of it. It's like, we will attack the temple. We will take back God's house and clear it of this sin. And then God will honor that by kicking the Romans out. And no, that didn't happen. But no, Rome is not going to go look for a tree hugger. Rome is not going to go try to find, like, people who are crucified were enemies of the state in that regard. And so if you just stole a piece of fruit, you're not getting crucified. You're getting crucified for crimes against Rome, which is also an important thing to note, because, you know, a lot of anti-Semitism is at the root of the way the Gospels portray how Jesus was killed, that the Jews did it and all of that, and that they chose Barabbas, which actually Pontius Pilate would never care enough about a Jew to go through all that, particularly from a poor one, from a place he'd never even heard of before. He was ruthless. He was completely ruthless and murderous. He wouldn't have given the choice. He wouldn't have cared. That's because we know about him as a person. Mm-hmm. Like, we know about Roman stuff way, you know, because they kept documents and things. So yeah, it's just when you learn these things, it makes other things impossible. And you start to see the world in a more 360 way. It's like, wait a minute, it's at Advent. Why are we singing about a child dying? You know, it's like, did he cry for a second? Or the implication that even if you're taking it at that, it's like, oh, wait a minute. If Jesus and his family were able to go hide in Egypt, and hide as in not stick out, then they must have been darker. Maybe not as dark as me, but they couldn't have been white if they could go to Egypt. Like, if the story, like, just take the story of this as it, he couldn't have been but so light, or else they would have stuck out.
Yeah, wow. This is some really interesting stuff. So for you would definitely say that your reason for leaving Christianity and leaving your faith behind is because of how flawed the doctrine is.
Well, it's not. It's the thing is, it's religion. It's theism in general. Like, I don't believe in supernatural forces. I'm not convinced that there is a thing called supernatural. It's probably just natural that we have not figured out.
Yeah. I don't believe
And
in supernatural at all either.
yeah, it's like, now, funny enough, I think it's cool in like fantasy stuff and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, I love it like that. But like, as in, oh no, like, I don't believe, it's not just that I don't like Christianity. I'm just not a theist, period. You know what
Yep.
I mean? I would still say that I'm still religious in some ways. I really like Zen Buddhism a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Some argue it's more of a practice than a religion, but it can go either way.
Yeah.
And but yeah, like, I don't, most people combine those two, but they're not necessarily, theism and religion are not necessarily the same thing. And humans just have this thing in them where they lean toward religious expression, if you will, whether there's a God there or not. There is religion. Humans express religion before they will express idea of a God. You know, Neanderthals burying their dead in a particular way and burying important items, that's expressing a religious belief.
Mm-hmm.
That's expressing belief about what happens, or where they, or they might need something. Like, that's a ceremony, a ritual of some sort. It's what we do. Is like, think about what's different between a Benny Hinn concert and a Michael Jackson concert where everybody is falling out. What is the difference? Take away the Bible and what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Nothing.
Nothing really. You know
Nope.
what I mean? And those folks were having an experience in the Michael Jackson concerts, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
They would say they were having an experience, but there was no God being talked about there. You know what I mean? It was a Michael Jackson concert.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, prayer and worship, especially in the evangelical world, it's just an experience. And people swear that they had an experience. And usually it's like you did have an experience, but it's probably not what you thought it was.
Oh yeah, I've fallen out before. I've spoken in tongues before. I've had the tears and things, but it's emotionally moving. I mean,
Yeah.
all the songs still, like, you listen to it, that is an emotionally moving song. It is. So sure. I mean, if you are convinced that this person loves you so much that they died for you, well, that's emotional. You know what I mean? Now it's like,
Yeah.
well, no, that's kind of cruel. Now I'm like, that's very, I mean, even when I was a Christian, I would kind of say, I would talk about how I did not like Good Friday. Even though we know it's not really good, we're saying that it's good because someone was murdered.
Yeah.
And it just seems to be we get too excited about this day. And I'll never forget, my pastoral care professor said that, which kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how people don't really believe like they say that they do. If you buried your grandmother on Monday and she knocked on your door on Thursday, even if she looked exactly how she was when she was alive, not like a zombie, you would freak out. You would lose your mind. You would not be happy. You would be freaked out.
Yeah.
You would not be excited. And so we tell people to be excited that someone is resurrected, when even if somebody does come back to life, even if that did happen or that would happen, you would be terrified. You would be terrified. Then you'd be angry because they're like, wait a minute, what happened? We cried, we mourned, we spent money on that casket, all these things. It just would not be this, wow, God is real.
Yeah.
And a lot of people could not handle that. That was a very tough day in class for a lot of people.
That is cool, though, that when you went to school, it seemed like you learned a lot of the logical stuff too. Because, when I went through Bible college, it even like said in there that the Bible was infallible, and I don't know, I just believed it. And then it felt like after I got out of Bible college was when I started to learn some of these facts kind of on my own.
And it's hard to learn those things on your own. I think that's the thing too. It's like, you're just not gonna, like, it can be like what you experience in the Bible college, but then somebody might read the Da Vinci Code and think that they've gotten some magic secret. And it's like, no, that's wrong too. I've had, type of all that type of stuff. But in particular for that, I remember particularly with the Bible. It's always for some class I'm taking. So I was in the middle of like my first semester of Greek. And by that time, if you have a good Greek teacher, you can probably read much of the Gospel of Mark, a good portion of the Gospel of John, because that's like, they call that baby Greek, because it's just really, you could tell it's more rudimentary, and probably the people who wrote it, you know, either didn't know Greek that well or were not like super well educated. You know, you could just tell by the way it was written. And, you know, it was another fraternity brother who had a church, and I was going to do my church internship, and we were talking about it because the one I was currently in was boring. And I was like, oh, well, I know this. I know him. He's cool. Let me see him go over him. We had a great conversation. I always like that he kind of was, he, at least in my mind, seemed thoughtful. I would kind of take that back now. And so, and then it got to a point where it was like, okay, well, sure, we'd love to have you come on over and work with us. Here's, you know, our doctrinal statements, and then read it. And at this point, I wasn't really fully aware or understood the whole neo-Calvinist reform stuff that was bubbling up. I understood it later on. I mean, well, soon after that, I should say, I got it, because I was like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? But, you know, I said, oh yeah, the Bible being inspired, yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't think the Bible is inerrant. I said, because, you know, it can't be. Like, it's an impossibility. I don't think it needs to be inerrant to be inspired. And it was like, well, you literally can't. And the whole tone of the conversation changed, even through email. It just changed completely. And that's when I was like, oh, because I just assumed that being thoughtful meant that you would think these type of things. And I did not yet realize that that thoughtfulness can go very far out of the window when it comes to faith. And that's a nuanced situation, but it doesn't apply. Someone could be like, I mean, hey, Ben Carson, gifted hands, you know, all the surgery, and then once you literally step an inch outside of the operating room, complete and utter train wreck, you know. But I didn't have a conception of that yet. I didn't understand how, nor could I explain it in the same way then, because it was just still starting to happen to me.
Yeah. So you left in 2016 too. So it's been about 6 years, almost coming up.
Yeah.
Maybe?
I mean, well, I think 2016 was when I began to be on that journey in earnest. I would say probably around so I think in 2016, the shoe was starting to drop. And I no longer believe, but I was trying to find a way to believe. And then around the 2017, end of that 2018, the beginning of 2018 is when I was like, okay, yeah, no, we're done.
Oh yeah. Okay. You did say 2018. Okay. So it's been only like 3.5-ish years, probably 4 years.
3.5. Yeah, 3.5, 4-ish. Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, are you happy now? You think it was so worth it to leave all of that and be able to openly live how you want to live without regret or guilt?
See, it's interesting because I think I was kind of, you know, I've had these 3 major experiences when you are a major point of finding out who you are. Coming out is at that point gay, then atheism, then neurodivergency.
Yeah.
And so all these major
That's a lot.
It's a whole lot, but I would do the same thing. I would not, like, if I could take a magic wand and make it different, I would not make that different, because I did what I could at the time with what I had. If I had more, I mean, I think that most of the time people do what they can, and if they could do better, they probably would have. More times than not. Not all the time, but, you know, a decent amount of the time. And yeah, I mean, happiness has never been a goal of mine. That may sound very depressing, but I think I kind of gave up on happiness as a thing to pursue many years ago because I just realized that I just wasn't happy. But I realized that happiness can be fleeting. When it comes, great, but I just something that just I never cared about it once I realized how fleeting it was. I was like, I know I'll be happy. It's like, yeah, I'm happy when, I like wheat checks because I'm weird. So it's like, oh wow, wheat checks is on sale. I bought some. I am happy.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. But for more, it's about being fulfilled. That's what it is. I think what the Greek word they use for that is like um eumodia. Eumodia. It's the same. Well, I won't get into Greek nerdism. I'll leave it alone. But it just basically means like being fulfilled. And it's like because happiness, if happiness is the only focus, then you will miss out on beautiful things because the way to get there will not make you happy. Like, I've done martial arts for years and like I did like CrossFit and I play tennis, stuff like that. And I'm very fulfilled doing those things. The joy of doing those things. But talk to me toward the end of a third set tennis match in the heat. I am not happy. First of all, I'm angry that it went this long because I probably would have thought that I should have ended it earlier. But that, yeah, I'm not happy. But after that day is over and I rest, if someone calls me to play tennis 2 days later, I'm gonna go back. You know what I mean? Because I'm fulfilled. That is something. I'm compelled. I'm something. I get to experience something. I get to experience something about myself more acutely in those situations, and those are the situations that I want to be in, because at the end of it, I am fulfilled. I'm not always happy. I'm not happy when I have to go run. Well, actually, no, I kind of like running now, but
You do?
I'm not. I'm not in anywhere near the shape because I had an injury a year and a half ago. I had an injury, and so I'm still kind of like I'm fine now, but now it's like my fitness, all of it was gone, all gone, starting from scratch. So I still like it, but I just can't do it the same way, at least not right now. But yeah, like I don't like I hate rowing on the row machine. I don't like it,
It's tough.
but I have to do it, because guess what? I know that me doing this rowing means that when it's really time to do it, it's going to be easy and I'm going to be fulfilled and I want to feel and be a certain way. So the things that I want to feel, the things that would fulfill me deeply on the inside, it takes work to get to it. And so if your only concern is, I want to be happy, well, then you're never going to really do much. and that's fine. And no one has to be this. No one has to. But I just know, like for me, being fulfilled as a person has led me down a much healthier road than trying to be happy.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
But that's, I think, in a less extreme way with anything in life. Like if you're in school and you want to pass, the bar or your boards, you got to study and it's hard and you don't get to do all the fun
work
things.
Hard.
Yeah, but it's you have to, which I think is a good corrective for now when it's like self-care is bubble baths and treat yourself and chocolate. And it's like sometimes self-care is going to the doctor when they're going to give you that ugly needle, but you need it. That's self-care. Or as self-care is, I really want to buy this book, but I'm not going to. I need to save, which is something that I should tell myself. It's not I buy books like they're nothing, but it's like doing the thing to take self-care is care. It can include those things, sure, but it's like taking care of yourself is saying, hey, I need to eat a vegetable today. I need to drink something besides soda today. Not for any type of shaming type of thing, because it's like, hey, I like soda, what I mean? It's not that, but it's more of, at least the way I see it, like, I don't want to die for a cause. I think the people who are at the root of the evils of the world would prefer me dead and silent. So I think it's resistance to be alive. And instead of pursuing happiness, I try to find joy. Because I find that joy is just like, hey, it's a really rough day, But when my dog wants to go out and I'm taking too long and he runs up to me and he nudges me, and by nudge I mean almost shove me to let me know that it's time. It's annoying, but that's cute because he's very to the point, like his dog dad.
Yeah.
And so I find joy in that, or you know what I mean, or little things like that, or like just little things, and that can be like, oh, that's just I look for those things. I find that I can find those things, and I can get a smile, but I don't necessarily account that with happiness,
Yeah.
per se. I mean, some people might. Who cares? It's, in that regard, but that I do absolutely. But sometimes you have to. Self-care is not always pleasant. And putting yourself, and I think that's why I wouldn't change anything. It wasn't pleasant having those conversations, making those choices, understanding what would happen, dealing with
Yeah.
the consequences. But I rest knowing that I did a number of things that many people, for whatever number of reasons, have not been able to do. And I had to do it. I don't think that makes me better per se, but it takes a certain level of internal strength to be able to do that multiple times and to have to kind of go that route. And so, if anything, even if I could say, oh, I look back and say, oh, okay, maybe that could have been different, that could have been different, sure. But the strength that it took and the courage that it took, if anything, if anything, I'm pretty impressed with that young man and what he was willing to do. Kudos to him.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge thing. You went through even more than what I had gone through. I mean, I had some other things on the side that contributed to my leaving, but I mean, to then be diagnosed with ASD and then having to come out, I mean, those are big things, and that does take a very brave person.
Yeah, I mean, it takes courage, and it's difficult because when you have to navigate something that other people don't really understand and are not willing to understand, and if it impacts how you like living a typical, like, as annoying as typical life is for most other people, it is impossible for me. I could never do it. Like, I'm literally, it cannot function that way. And so you have to like figure out ways to, in some way, carve out a space where you can actually be what you need to be, you know? And I feel that most acutely, when it comes to that, but it's difficult. And that's why I think it's important for people to share their stories, to share the difficult times. But then also, talk about how, to put it in Black folk church terms, how they got over, how they got to the other side, or how they just got further along. Maybe there is no other side, but how I got further along down the road. I think it's important. One of the main reasons why I talk and share things like this is because there aren't people who look like me. And there are not a lot of people who have my background. I think one of my main frustrations with a lot of atheist spaces is that they don't have theological education. So they say a lot of things that are like, well, look, I agree with you. This is bad. But one, you're not accurate in what you're saying. And two, is like, you don't have to believe in something to respect it. And I think particularly, I mean, it happens with Black atheists too. Like they say a lot of stuff. It's like, no, that's not actually true. And you just want to like dunk on people because you think you're smarter, because you don't, like, you want to dunk on the church folks because they're praying and giving tithes, but you think that people are sick because there's a 5G tower up the block. Make it make sense, because it doesn't. But besides that, what usually my issue is with white atheists is that it's this, I have yet to hear a white atheist, except like maybe like in the clergy project group or stuff like that. I've not yet to hear another white atheist who has a platform talk about white Christian nationalism. Haven't heard it. Like the Sam Harris's of folks in the world. I'm sure maybe there's someone out there. So it's not saying that it doesn't exist. Maybe it does. But like, even when I see a lot of the online discourse or anything like that, I would say outside like the Clergy Project, and that's just like seeing folks in the group talking about Trump stuff and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I always hear maybe about Islam or something else, but it's never about how we got to Trump, never about the religious right, never about any of those types of things. And I know actually there are organizations that do, but they're like more like advocacy based and like nonprofit stuff like that. But I'm talking about the card carrying buy my book type of
Mm-hmm.
folks. It's like, and I said, as a person of color, the majority of the world is people of color, and religion has a very big cultural aspect. It's not like it is here for us, or particularly for white people, where it can just be like, oh, I'm Christian. Never mind, Kabbalah now. No, I'm Buddhist. You know what I mean? It's deeper cultural, and not that it's not cultural realities with white people. It's just that it's a different situation. It's a cultural tie. And that's the way religion is for most of the people of color around the world. And so when you talk about religion in paternalistic terms, you're talking like it's. I have yet to hear somebody in those situations discuss their atheism without delving into racism. They just can't do it. That's why I admonish. Is like, no, 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 no. You have plenty of white religious folks to talk about. Talk about them. Let and uplift and listen to the Black agnostics and atheists who are talking about or of every. There's atheists everywhere, even they don't call themselves that. They don't need some crotchety old white guy saying that their people are stupid, particularly when the only reason why we know about the Bible is because y'all couldn't stay home. Right? So it's and
Mm-hmm.
that I think that often confuses people because it's like, no, in my view, like I said before, religion is a human thing. All of us do some of it to some extent, in some way, shape, or form. It's an impulse, it's what we do. And to destroy religion means you have to destroy people. There is something in us that needs to make meaning of things around us somehow. We look at, but this the fact that our self-awareness is so much, we probably some function of that just so that way we don't drive ourselves bonkers, right? Somehow. But that's human. And you don't have to believe in a God, but you can also like respect people. And that seems to be really hard to do. It's like, I'm not going to go like, yeah, you asked me, do I believe in prayer? No. But I'm not going to go to the 6 a.m. prayer and start bothering people, or I'm not going to comment under if my cousin is talking about how prayer is good. I'm not going to go comment under there and say, oh well, I don't know why you're doing that. Hopefully one day you'll grow up. Like, what's the point? What's the point of
Yeah.
doing that?
Yeah, I agree. It's that's been something that has been kind of difficult for me because I kind of went through an angry phase where I would point those things out, and I'm now kind of starting to get to the point where it's like I'm seeing this separation. And I mean, obviously what's going on around the world and in our country right now, that there's already major separation, but I'm finding the importance of really just being respectful on this end and understanding that this is just for some people a way for them to make sense of the world around them. And on top of it, indoctrination is just so strong in some people that it's almost impossible to say anything anyway. It's
Yeah,
almost kind of pointless with some people.
it's not a hobby. I think that's the thing too. It's not like it's just oh, well, I'm just going to stop trading baseball cards now. I'm just going to stop. It's not that. It's a deeply emotional, it's a deeply mental, a deeply cultural thing for everyone, in that regard. And so it's such a huge process. And even under that, forget about the God stuff. It's like that's community, that's family, that's networking, that's friendships. Those are careers, you know. Let's say, hell, even if you're a white at a white Baptist church in Oklahoma, and you decide that you're an atheist now, and you had a mom and pop shop, you had a convenience store, and lots of people from the church came there. Now they don't. you know? So it's so many other realities that while we can still talk about the problems with belief, particularly in these ways, you don't need to be disrespectful of people and where they are, which is kind of why I'm happy that I had my experience, because I know I like to think that while I definitely learned and grew from those times, I was also not just completely oblivious. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't like just cruel and whatever. Um, but like people, they need space and time. I actually want a world where the church and I are working for the same thing. I don't care if I'm not going to pray for it, but if we all want the same, like I want the church to get to a place where it's not homophobic, because so many people go there, and if they hear it from the pulpit, they're not going to throw their kid out. I don't
Yeah.
really care that they're not a card carrying atheist, and we all are not going to think the same thing anyway. I'm a proponent more of pluralism, that we all need. It's going to be many ways, many understandings, and as long as we may take different vehicles, but as long as we're going in the same direction, it's fine. Yeah, doesn't matter to me in that regard. If, oh, well, I believe, oh, because it's an experience. If you just can't conceptualize what it would be like for that to be, what am I supposed to do? Yank it out? Like I thought that way for a long time until something changed. The one thing I would say is that what I try to do, because I'm like uniquely educated and still being an atheist, is I try to equip people with tools to be able to think through their own belief and religious practices. And so then they can make their own informed, healthy decisions about atheism or about their belief. And so I've helped people find progressive churches to go to that I thought would be a great fit for them, because it's like, well, look, if you're learning that there's something wrong with being queer, or if you're understanding, if you're thinking differently about women than the church taught you, yes, yay. There are plenty of atheists who are horrible when it comes to sexism.
Mm-hmm.
Left and right. So you got it. Do you need to go to church to get it more? Fine. As long as you get it. Don't care. As long as your beliefs aren't trampling over someone else, fine. I do
Or
think
detrimental to people.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to agree with it. It's like, no, 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 thank you. No, thanks. But also the placebo effect is real too. And not in a like patronizing way, but it's like if you kneel to pray and you honestly believe that someone who deeply cares about you is listening, well, yeah, you'll feel better. Your brain doesn't know the difference.
Yep, definitely. So, I usually end with asking what sort of let's say that somebody comes across this video that is very much like you, or parts of them are very much like you, and they're identifying with a lot of what you're saying. What advice would you give to that person?
Whew. Because of what part are they resonating with? There's so much there.
Let's say let's just say they're queer and in church, and
Okay.
they're coming across this video and their wheels are turning and they're a little skeptic.
Okay. This is what I would say. And I said this to somebody before, and it was like a very, I guess in their mind, it wasn't the thing that they expect the atheist to say. I say this. One, we can never define God. Anytime we define it, God by definition literally has to become not that. Because God is indescribable and God isn't even human. Can't be, right? So if something like that, if that undefinable exists, it does not and probably cannot care about what it says in this book. And that you have the right to define your experience for yourself the same way these other folks are, The problem is that they're trying to define your experience in a way that makes them comfortable. You exist, and the fact that you exist means you have a right to be who you are. You don't have to ask permission. And that doesn't mean be reckless. It doesn't mean, like account and see where you are and what you need to do and see if if are you safe or not safe. You don't have to make any grand declaration right now, even if it's just in your own room, but you are the one. Like, we make God in our own image. We do.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does. That's what happens. And so we take our experience and shape a God that we need for where we are and for what we want to see. And that you have permission to do that as well. Everybody in that book did the same thing. So you can do that too. And even if that means to close the book and put it away, that's fine too. But you do not have to be this. You don't feel, you may not get it now, but all of these things are lies. These are other people's misunderstandings and traumas and prejudices and hangups, and they are putting them on you because they don't know where else to put it. You do not have to carry it. You can be who you decide to be. You can tell, like, one of my, and this is long, but one of my favorite scriptures is when Moses is like, well, who am I supposed to tell them that you are? Tell them I am sent you. And I like it as in Hebrew, it more means like, I will be what I will be. It's like this really weird word. It's just like, I'll just be whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be whatever I need to be. I'll be whatever. I'm whatever. It's like, I can't, like, it's undefinable. I'll be what I'll be. What does that even mean? I am. Like, you just are. You will be what you will be. And you will be what you will be. No one has the right to stop that. Maybe you have to be like and cover them with your hand and let them see your back as you walk away. Maybe you have to do that. But you will be what you will be, and you have permission to be. Like, let's say if this person is explicitly Christian, because I've done this in this group of people. I was like, listen, I will use your stuff on you. If you are made in God's image, then you also are what you are, just like God is what God is. So who is anyone to tell you that to not be what you are? Because this is what you are. This is who you are. So be that. That is you. And it sucks and it's rough and it's tough. I'm not saying to make it simple, but even right now, it was just you understanding that. Like, you will get so much power from understanding that you are who you are, and that it is nothing wrong with being just that. Even if it's just in your room for now, even if nobody else knows, but you know that you are who you are. And yeah, that's really it. Everything else just figured out from there, but you are who you are.